Pleased to welcome our first speaker, Gavin Simpson. In addition to being a very active member of the South East Scotland intensive care community, Gavin has been a consultant at NHS Fife since 2009. He has led their cardiac arrest group for some time, and the work around recognition but also review of cardiac arrest in NHS Fife has been kind of well publicised across Scotland. In addition, Gavin has spoken for many years about their eOb system, which I think has been in place since 2012. He has a huge amount of experience and probably the most experience in leading such a programme in NHS Scotland. So we're really pleased to hear what he has to say about eOb reflections from NHS Fife. Over to you, Gavin. Thank you very much.
Gregor, thanks for welcoming everyone today. It's been it's great to be invited along to talk to you all. So thank you very much for the invite. And thanks for the layout of the afternoon. It's going to be good, and I'm going to be really interested in speaking to everyone a bit later on about everybody's experiences and opinions. I have been asked today, as Gregor pointed out, that we've been doing eObs in Fife for a long time, and we initially started the project way back, you're quite right, in 2012, rolled it out holistically to all the acute adults in 2015, and then latterly we've gone on to all our community hospital beds recently in the last couple of years. And so I was asked along today to not talk about the installation and how we rolled out as a QI project initially, and good colleagues Nikki Moran and Karen Gowdy are going to speak a little bit later on about their experiences, but I've been asked to talk a little bit more about the bedded in advantages maybe of having an eOb system. And so I've only got a few slides, but I'm going to talk to some of them. So if we could go to the next slide, please. In order to do that and maybe to lay out the afternoon and the benefits of eObs, I suppose we need to know the fundamentals of deteriorating patients. So forgive me, because I know there's a number of seasoned experts in the crowd today who probably look at this and recognize it and say, well, that's obviously what we need to do for deteriorating patients. But the logic of having an eOb system is on the basis of the fundamentals of about how we identify and manage our deteriorating patients in our hospitals. And this is a very distilled down snapshot of maybe how we manage our deteriorating patients, and we look at an outcome in SPSP of our cardiac arrest as a raw outcome, but we also want to know about our processes leading up to how we manage our deteriorating patients. But if you take in principle what we'd like to do for any deteriorating patient, and if you accept that maybe anyone that we feel merits to be admitted to a hospital is potentially deteriorating by definition, i.e. we wouldn't admit them otherwise because they'd be fine at home, but we decide this patient needs to come in to be observed, to be diagnosed and to be treated, or they will continue to carry on in that trajectory of deterioration, then ultimately we can extend that and say, well, if we left them in a hospital bed and didn't observe them and didn't do anything to them, then they might deteriorate further, and eventually they might end up having a cardiac arrest. So what we've done for years, since early warning, well, since observations came along, since we started taking pulses on patients, we decided to take observations and make a judgment call about whether that patient's stable or getting better or not. And then what we like to do with those observations is distill that down. And early warning scores were created 35 more years ago now to try and simplify those physiological observations into a single number to make sure that we could communicate those early obs, those complex interplay of observations in a meaningful way, so we could just create a single number, so we could phone someone up and say, listen, we need help because this person's single early warning score is very high, therefore we need help. And then what we want is, once we've called for that help, is to get a medical response with a plan. And if we boil that plan down into simple terms, we want to do one of three things, and that's triage. And Gregor talked about that at that last webinar and SPSP conference, saying that triage is important. And what we'd like to do for any deteriorating patient is get them to an area of higher observation, maybe in HDU or ITU, Or maybe this person has had every intervention tried, and a large proportion of our patients, unfortunately, we have no interventions left, or we've tried everything we can, but we need to focus on the well-being and dignity of this patient. But they might need a DNA CPR or a TEP or an ACP because this person might be dying. Or we manage that patient in situ, and we manage that patient on a ward with treatments, with interventions, and we hope that patient gets better. But in all three of those circumstances, what we do if we admit them to ITU and HDU is stop taking observations, and therefore they're on a different observation protocol with continuous observations. Or if they're DNA CPR and ACP, maybe we want to carry on doing observations but not alert and make phone calls for medical plans because we've got one in place. Or indeed, if we get that patient better, then hopefully their OBS will improve. So that's very simple, but it seems to make common sense, and that's what we're trying to do for all our deteriorating patients. The question is, can we simplify this even further? And if we go to the next slide, there is a possibility that we could simplify that diagram even further into detecting our patients, whether you want to do it by taking the physiological OBS and an early warning scores, and then we can have an action, and that action can be the medical plan, the treatments, the intervention, whether that's an outreach team, EAMP teams, junior doctors, whatever it may be in our hospitals. But you can detect as many patients as you want, and you can have the most robust action plan in a hospital written down and protocolized with an SOP and all sorts of teams that can go out to see these patients and do what you need to do to triage these patients. But the missing link is the key ingredient here that's extremely important, or nothing will work, and these patients will not be triaged, and these patients will continue to deteriorate. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that the missing ingredient that's really important is the communication. If we don't get the communication absolutely spot on between the detection and the action, you can have the most robust detection system for taking OBS, and you can do them diligently every minute of every day, and you can have the best action teams. But if the best action teams and action plans don't know where the sick patients are, those patients will not get treated, and they will not be triaged, and they'll continue to deteriorate. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is where the benefits, I suppose, of eOBS come in, and it's maybe the unseen missing ingredient for many of the systems that we have in hospitals for picking up and acting upon our deteriorating patients. And if we don't know about that missing link and we can't measure that missing link, then we sometimes scratch our heads saying, well, we've got great OBS systems and we've got great teams that can go out and see these patients, but actually we're still not improving, and the question is why. So eObs systems are a very simple communication tool, and that's it. And it's communication in the modern era, really. And there's a whole bunch of benefits. But in simplicity, what it does is now all the nurses and auxiliary teams that take observations for our patients in a hospital put them into handheld devices in our hospital. And the eObs hospitals, and those are converted immediately and automatically without any mathematical error. You may take the wrong OBS, but the maths of adding up the individual OBS is error-free and gives you a score that's visible. And then what it does is it alerts automatically, and we can send out pages automatically to people's phones or pagers to say, Mr. Johnson, Bay 4, bed 4 has an early warning score of 6, please respond. And that suddenly flips the dynamic of nurses in the middle of the night on busy wards with 10 patients to look after, going to a phone, paging someone, hoping that someone will respond, and hoping that that medic or other at the other end of the phone aren't equally busy, and get back to them immediately to come and have a conversation with them about how sick their patient actually is. So that automatic addition takes away an error rate. In our hospital, it was about 9% of some of the mathematics of just adding up the scores. It automatically alerts and communicates out on an individual basis, traditionally between the person taking the OBS and the person who's meant to introduce the action plan, and gets that message out in a holistic zero tolerance way to some extent, in that every set of OBS is taken. But the communication goes a step further than that. It's not just individual one-to-one communication. Some of the benefits of an eObs system is that you can take that one set of OBS, and once it's in the system, once it's put into the handheld device, whatever way that may be, the communication suddenly extrapolates up the way and goes exponentially increases the power of that data that is now a single data point. And rather than relying on somebody making a phone call to an individual one other, that data is there for anyone to see anywhere in the hospital. And what I mean by that is we have traditional traditional looking charts because people are doctors and nurses maybe don't like change, or certainly early adopters maybe don't. And so the thought of having a different format was a bit of a sticking point in our hospital. But certainly the traditional paper chart is visible in the electronic chart that you see there. And what can happen is anybody can phone anybody up and phone them up, and I can immediately get that chart up in front of me and see a wealth of data in front of me and have a meaningful conversation, whether I'm in a clinic or whether I'm actually in theaters or an anesthetic room or in my ITU. Somebody during the day, at the weekend, in the middle of the night can phone me up and say, oh, I'm concerned about this patient. And I say, hold on, and I get the chart up and I can see exactly what the minute-to-minute OBS are for that patient, and have a meaningful conversation and a run chart going backwards. In addition to that, another benefit is that you can conglomerate scoreboards. And what I mean by that is you can create a virtual ward or a virtual hospital. And it means that you can get a rundown on a scoreboard of your top 5, top 10, top 100 sickest patients in the hospital. So rather than relying on individuals maybe at handovers and huddles to come to the meeting with bits of paper or post-it notes or memories from an hour ago of what the worst or the highest set of OBS were on a ward or even in the hospital, what we do now in the hospital is that we switch on a scoreboard. And at our virtual huddle that we have for the whole hospital every morning, we switch on this scoreboard, and rather than relying on individuals coming to the meeting and handing over what they've gleaned from a 7 o'clock handover in the ward to find out who's sick, we switch on the scoreboard and we can see live, top to bottom, the sickest patients in the hospital, and plans can be made or questions can be asked about what's being done for those patients. And suddenly that individual set of OBS from that patient can be seen not by just one person or 10 people, but can be seen by everybody in the hospital all at once, 100 people, 1,000 people, or however many staff want to dip into it. And that live scoreboard is constantly updated, and it doesn't need people to physically update it. The OBS system itself keeps that scoreboard live. So suddenly having a live scoreboard is extremely useful. In addition to that, we've got big television screens in every one of our medical handover rooms in all of the wards in our hospital. And what we have is a patient track live feed of that scoreboard that refreshes every minute, so that you can see as you walk into the medical handover room where all the handovers happen, the first thing you see in your face is that scoreboard of who the sickest person on the ward is. The benefits of that is that you can prioritize immediately, rather than jobs needing done or other bits of documentation that needs to be filled up or conversations that need to be had. The sickest top 10 patients on your ward are immediately in your face, pushed into the room so that it's unavoidable. And that requirement to click or log in or review a patient's set of notes at the end of the bed to see who is sick has gone, and it's now much more powerful, and that data is in your face as soon as you walk into any of the wardrooms in the hospital. And that immediately prompts action, because everybody will react when they see somebody that's sick. So what are the other benefits? Well, one of the things that we talked about is getting the validity, getting your OBS on time. If we don't do our OBS, then you don't pass go. If we don't do our OBS on time, then we don't pass go. Now, before we started this project way back 2012, but then when we rolled out in 2015, we did some analog audits of what our compliance rate, on time and complete OBS were in the hospital, and it came out looking at I can't remember how many thousands of OBS we looked at, but it was a lot of patients, that our compliance rate on time was probably about or less than 50% once you'd taken into account those that were missed, those that weren't completed.